The following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in a Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
Well, that sounds like good news.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Second Rate Saints podcast. I am your, not producer today, though, but I'm a guy on the podcast. But to my left...
I'm the producer for the day. I'm Joel, and I'm also on the podcast.
Did I just not say my name?
You might not have. That's Caleb, the guy with the voice that came before mine. That's Caleb over there.
Is he to your right?
Yeah, he's to my right. We're not going to make to my right a thing. We got to make to my left a thing.
You're right.
Yeah. And to my left...
is not Colton today. Colton is not here, sadly. I very much miss this guy.
We've created a very confusing audio space right now.
To Colton's would-be left is myself, Joshua. I do research sometimes, not today. And to my left back is Caleb. And Caleb has read a book.
Sometimes I do that.
Man, we're so sarcastic today.
I would say
good energy.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Sometimes I do it a lot.
I love this this conversation.
Yeah, it's so redundant. But the book that I read is called Against the Gods, the subtitle being The Polemic Theology of the Old Testament by John D. Currid. Yeah, so it is exactly what it says. It's a polemic of the Old Testament. Polemic being where they take an idea or a way of presenting an idea of the cultures around them or the cultures that are near them, the stories, and then they flip that on its head to present their own ideas. A modern example of this would actually be like how Pepsi will have one commercial and it'll be like, hey, this kid, he buys a bunch of Coke so he can stand on top of them to buy a Pepsi. Yeah. And then Coke takes the exact same commercial but just reverses the labels. Mm-hmm. Well, Coke did a polemical commercial. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's actually a lot of instances of this in the Old Testament. So it's actually a very good book. It's actually a very short book. It's not even 200 pages. Actually, all the way to the back index, it's only 150. Wow. So it's very short. He's pretty thorough enough for being 150 pages. I will say for myself at least, I found his arguments on a couple of these things a little weak. Of course, as a book being 150 pages, and he would be. He goes in the introduction that it's like, hey, I want this book to be approachable for laymen, just so that they're aware of, hey, this story occurs, this like idea occurs in like multiple different cultures and multiple different times, and they predate the biblical text. And so he goes over like 4 different flood accounts. Yeah. He goes over the idea of the righteous sufferer, of the spurned seductress, of like a bunch of different things that occur in the cultures around Judaism. And it's if you look at it from that lens, when Judaism then makes a claim through the biblical text, what is specifically different that should be noted? Yeah, there might be some similarities, but if there's some similarities and they acknowledge those similarities, because of course they would know of them, then the differences are what's being communicated.
Yeah. So just like you would know that Coke doesn't like Pepsi.
Yeah.
Right, that kind of thing. They would know in the culture that's a... Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you've seen this commercial about Pepsi 10 times and all of a sudden it's about Coke, then you're like, oh, this isn't about Pepsi.
Yeah.
And it's really fun getting into like the understanding of polemics when you get into like it's from like one of the Greek words for war.
Well, it's actually it's interesting because it shows up in politics all the time too.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting study on that idea. Again, his arguments aren't super strong. But you know what? What I loved about this book was the amount of ground it covered in such a short period of time, making yourself familiar with the different connections, the different patterns, the different similarities. It was good. What's that?
Nothing. I was going to cut you off.
No. I was going to let you.
I've been having a pattern recently, but I'm going to let you talk.
Yeah, I don't know. It was good. I actually took a lot of notes in it. Again, that's Against the Gods, Polemic Theology of the Old Testament by John D. Currid. It's really good. I'd recommend it, especially because it's only 150 pages.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, if you want to flesh out your idea of the Old Testament and like in the context of other cultures, very good.
Yeah.
And then it would allow you to, where you find things that are more interesting, go into further study on those things in commentaries and whatnot. Are you going to take a... Josh is taking a picture of the book so he can buy it himself.
Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Most of my photos in my phone are just books
Yeah,
I got to remember.
That's completely fair.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about the polemic thing for just a second more, I'd say before I started any kind of theological studies, the closest thing I knew to a polemic was the flood stories. Is that the pinnacle of the book? Like, is that kind of the main focus for the...
Like the flood stories?
Yeah, a bunch of
specifically?
different flood stories. Like that one I've heard talked to ad nauseum, kind of a thing.
There's... How many pages are dedicated to it? From page 48 to page...
48. No.
63. That's all there is
wow.
on flood stories.
Okay.
And then it goes into, Joseph comparisons and brother comparisons and the spurned seductress, and then stuff about the Reed Sea. And then there's stuff about Canaanite connections.
The stories about two brothers, like Cain and
Yeah,
Abel,
he gets into
is
that, yeah.
everywhere. Like the movie Brother Bear. It's three brothers, yeah, but it's like the same like idea of like the brothers don't get along. Like that owl movie, The Guardians, or whatever it was.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Right? It's Cain and Abel. The even jokingly, like the end of Star Wars, even though like he was his mentor, there's the line where he's like, "You are my brother," and then he cuts his legs off. Like
That comes after.
yeah.
But yeah, no, it has a section on that, gives it its due diligence for as short of a book as it is, and then moves on to other connections, which I appreciate. It's written so that laymen can understand it, know what's going on, and I appreciate that. I would like it to go further, and so I will probably have to look for another book. But if it serves as an introduction, it advertises itself as an introduction, and it's successful at being an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So
Yeah. Awesome.
yeah. But our topic, we're finishing up the Gospels series.
Well, that sounds like good news.
Oh, and what's the good news in Greek?
Evangelion?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Where do we find the good news in the Bible?
Just outside the city, returning from war. That's the background of Evangelion. It was shouted when you came back into town from war.
Because
When you won.
because Christus Victor, right?
Because Christus Victor and moral influence theory. So we're tying everything back to atonement theories.
We're talking everything back to moral influence theory.
You thought this series started with Introduction to the Gospels. No, it started with our atonement theory podcast.
But if we're tying up stuff,
Yes.
we talked about, hey, there's 4 different Gospels. Hey, there's the Q document. Hey, there's John. Hey, they have different like emphasis and all this kind of stuff. How do we deal with those like different emphasis? Like there's stuff that's called harmony of the Gospels. What is that?
Yeah. How do we find the through lines?
Sure.
We could do what you did and get a graph set up of all the verses that correlate between the 4 books.
You could do that.
It's a very Caleb thing to do.
Hey, I'll make you take a survey on it.
Yeah.
Actually, this like harmony of the Gospels idea isn't super new. Actually, there was an early Christian in the like 170 who was like, "Hey, let's try to make one solid." Now his thing was one solid text.
Yeah.
Meta gospel.
He was like, "Hey, can we just make it one book?" Everyone was like, "No."
Well, his thing was like, yes, he condensed it. Yes, he put it into one text. Most modern harmony of the Gospels, they'll actually have like 4 columns.
Yeah.
And then
like an interlinear.
Yeah, like an intro.
No, sorry. There's Bibles you can get where it's 4 translations together.
The Net Bible, is that what you're talking about?
No.
Oh,
That's one specific translation.
okay.
Which is great, by the way. But they'll have like 4 columns, and then they'll go through, and when one gospel doesn't talk about that thing, they'll just leave that column blank. And they'll move
Nice.
down the line. Whereas he and most of the other early church harmony of the gospels, they would like try to compile it into one story. Sometimes rearranging one gospel or another. Sometimes like, this doesn't really fit with anything, leave it out. And so
Take Luke's and then just add John to it, and you got like 90% of the call.
there you go. Yeah. But when you remove everything that's not in all 4, you end up with a really interesting bare bones.
That's not in all 4. That is shared in all 4.
That's I should say shared in all 4. When you
Yeah.
remove everything, you're left with something that's
Yeah.
like the bare bones of the gospel message.
Yeah.
More so than just Mark.
Yeah.
Which is designed to be the bare bones of the gospel message.
Yeah, because he's shock and awe.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on, and next, and immediately, and the very thing after.
And the guy dies, and he might be risen again. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Your life depends on it. Now.
Yeah, exactly. But when you narrow just what they have in common, there's only a couple things that actually line up that way, but they're very interesting at what specifically they are. It starts off with the ministry of John the Baptist is shared in all 4. All of these are shared in all 4. The baptism of Jesus, the first disciples of Jesus, the feeding of the 5,000, Palm Sunday, or the triumphal entry, the anointing of Jesus, the Last Supper, Judas's kiss, the arrest of Jesus, Jesus' trial at the Sanhedrin, Jesus carrying the cross, Jesus' crucifixion, the empty tomb, and the resurrection. Which is like, hey, this is Jesus' ministry and his accomplishment of effectively changing the world. All like condensed into how many points there? Like what? 14? That's it.
Points, wow.
And so that's the through line between all 4 of them.
How many of them are in Passion Week?
Technically, 2, 4, 6.
I thought you were about to
8,
say 2. I'm like,
10.
no, it can't be 2.
10.
10.
10.
Okay, well, that's a significant amount, considering his ministry was 3 years. And then the commonality running through it is,
Seemingly the most important stuff.
Yeah.
At the end.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
John is just like, hey,
I mean,
Jesus
to be
did
fair,
stuff.
The ending of a story is typically the most important part.
Thanks, Joel.
Or the beginning, however you want to look at it. How did we get here?
Harmonies.
Yes. What about him? You want to say something?
No, I was trying to move on from where we were. So we've got this bare bones idea. Is that sufficient for the truth of the gospel, the message, the good news?
I would actually articulate, so yes.
Yeah?
I would think that this is, if you're going to go, what are the 4 gospels sharing a testimony about? Like, that is the through line there. You could reduce it into what are the synoptic gospels testimony about, or have our testimony about specifically, and it gets more specific, probably because they shared a source of some description, and then they went off on their own other sources and other theological emphasize, whatever. And then John goes off and does his thing. But if you were even just to ignore the synoptic, commonalities and go with all 4, you end up with, even when you start to view these ideas in a Jewish context, you end up with not just a bare bones, but a fully functional bare bones of Jesus' ministry, Jesus' claim to deityship. I would argue, especially with his trial at the Sanhedrin.
Yep.
Right? And you get Jesus' kingship, Palm Sunday, and his crucifixion. And you get his way is prepared for by John the Baptist, tying things into with the prophets of old. And so I think it's not just a bare bones, but a fully functional testimony of this is what Christ did.
Yeah.
And you see all 4 of the gospels are centered around that same story.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's as if all of the extra, not fluff, the ads that they flesh their story, the same story out with, is what pushes it in the direction they want it to go in.
Yeah.
With the notes that they want, well, like who they're writing it for, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Then
What theology are they?
Yeah.
What heresy are they
Channeling.
confronting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Channeling? Challenging.
Channel your inner heresy.
Josh over there.
Yeah. No, I think looking at the Gospels as trying to find a harmony is really interesting, because a lot of scholars seem to produce their own harmony of the Gospels. I don't know how many times you've gone into any sort of Christian bookstore and there'll be like 8 different harmonies of the Gospels, and then you go to the used section and there's like 18 different harmony of the Gospels.
Here's the thing. With all the books I own, I don't think I've ever seen a harmony of the Gospels book.
What? Joel, how many times have you seen a harmony of the Gospels?
I've seen a couple times, but they're always like really dry looking textbooks.
But like I get the there's like LT Holcroft's the 4 Gospels, but he just goes over the 4 Gospels.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we're talking about harmony of the Gospels.
Yeah, I've never seen this.
Okay, well then it's just me.
Well, no. This is interesting. Tell me, what do they do?
Most of the time they either try to condense it into one text,
Yeah.
or they try to rearrange it so that this is the actual order of events.
Oh, yeah, I've seen
yeah.
the chronological ones.
Yeah,
Those are really interesting.
Or they try to, they do the 4-column thing.
Yeah.
The really useful ones are when they try to, actually I think there's 15 common points rather than 14, but when they focus on these and then they try to create a through line,
Yeah.
giving the context for each instance, while still trying to when you're following through, it's like, okay, this first point that's common in all 4, this is the context in all 4, add that as a unit, next add all of those contexts as a unit, and then they build this thing of, Jesus is moving through with the different plural of emphasis.
I think it's just emphasis.
Emphases?
I don't know.
That'd be fun. I don't think that's it, though.
Emphasos.
Those are the good ones. But honestly, I don't really own one. Actually, that's not true. I own one on Logos, but I've used that, but I don't.
Oh, but as you and me both agree, anything on the internet doesn't count as far as books.
It's not on the internet. It's on my hard drive.
I got that downloaded. That's with all my JPEGs. I just have 300 JPEGs that are all just
just different chiasms. But that's harmony of the Gospels. Very short and simple. A lot of study can go into that.
Yeah. There's another kind of thing we'd mentioned about the harmony of the Gospels is they kind of all talk about
a different aspect of
of the
king and the kingdom. Yeah, no, that's funny because we created our own little idea of harmony of the Gospels just naturally by reading the Gospels.
Do I want to read it out?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah.
And so it's Matthew is the kingdom is here. Mark is the king is here. Luke is what is the kingdom? What's it about? What does it look like? And then John is who is the king? Who does he look like? Mm-hmm. Who is he?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like Genesis, where it's like the first 3 are here's the space, and then the next 3 are here's what fills it.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting analogy, but okay, I'll let it go. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Light and darkness. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Sky and ocean, and then land, and then the things in the light and the darkness, the things in the water and the sky, and then the things on the land.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I find it interesting that you... Actually, I really like that you came up with this. I guess it's one of those things when you've gone to school and you've read enough books, how much do you actually just... is your idea and just you regurgitating something that you've read and be like, holy moly, this is good.
Yeah. It's so refreshing at the end of a 4-year program when you finally can say what you think in a research paper.
Yeah.
I don't think I can do that. Because when I write something, it's just like, and then I turn to Joel and be like, hey, this is a cool idea. He's like, I read that in this book that you have on your shelf. And be like, oh, right.
No, but that's the point of the research paper in 4th year is you don't use commentaries.
This is true.
This is terrifying.
You use your own ideas, whereas for the whole undergrad, the whole idea is that you're using other people's ideas.
Yeah, no, I'm working through that right now.
It's terrifying.
It's great. But you're right, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Harmony of the Gospels, very small section. We could probably dedicate more to it, but as stated,
Well,
there's so many of them, and we've covered a little bit in each episode.
yes.
I think emphasizing those 15 core points is really where any sort of harmony of the gospel is at its strength.
But is there like we've listed off verses, we've orchestrated like here's a layer of events that occur. Sorry, a cascade of events that occur in all the books, and we can go, okay, here's a unity in the story that they're not contradictory. Blah blah blah. Also, like their messages seem to like thread together. Is there something about the Gospels like that they all bring like? They all have their, like, note. They all have their, like, emphasis. They all have their, like, spice. But, like, is there something that all the Gospels do together?
I think so. And I'm going to reiterate the thing that I said for the last 5 episodes. And it's the story of this is how Jesus changed the world.
Okay.
He is the king. He is bringing the kingdom. And there's many analogies to talk about how that is done, when that's done, where is it done. In the heart, in the whatever, right? But it boils down to this is big, what this guy did.
Yeah.
And it affects everything.
Whether you're Jewish, Roman, Greek, Gentile, woman, man.
Slave or free. Yeah.
Satan or an angel. Like,
on.
it's big. No. It's not effective to him redemptively, but it's like John kind of throws shade at Satan, and he's just like, and it's just like, hey, watch out, you know?
This is true. But I think it's basically like this is a big this guy is a big deal. What he's done is a big deal, and this is the story of what happened.
Yeah,
and now it's meant to urge on so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Joel, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I do enjoy kind of a harmony between all events, but I don't know. You said they're all kind of in the same tune, right? I'm trying to formulate what I'm trying to say here, and maybe that's why I haven't.
No, it's okay.
For the
Take
last
time.
Couple minutes.
Say words, and we'll help you get there.
So I'm trying to figure out what the analogy is for the harmonization of the Gospels. Is it that we're all playing in the same key using different notes? Is that the idea? Are there going to be different emphasis? Are there going to be?
I think it would be there's different instruments playing the same melody.
Yeah, we could do something like that.
Let's all talk in metaphor for the next 15 minutes.
Okay,
That'd be great.
let's take this back 3 levels of abstraction and make sure it's unintelligible to all.
Is the other idea like, and you see this like there's an idea where Paul, he takes from other myths, other stories, other people groups, and he says like, hey, this is true, but about this God, not yours. Like Paul taught when he's on Mars Hill and he's talking about
the altar to an unknown God.
Altar to an unknown God, and then also quotes that Greek play. On like we move and breathe and in him. Yeah. In him we move and breathe. And Jude quotes apocryphal texts and and brings them into the truth. I think there's this kind of really cool thing about humans that because God made us to, in the Roman sense in Romans 1, where like we trade a truth for a lie, but we still see the truth. It's just we're built to have ourselves orient God at the top, and so we can't escape seeing him there in a fashion. And so when we write things that are beautiful and true and meaningful, they undoubtedly touch the divine.
Okay.
And so
I agree.
And so like these, and even more so when they're talking about Jesus, these disciples and these people that have met the eyewitnesses and stuff like that, when they write, they're immediately going to hit threads.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that ties into one of the things that I was going to talk about in the highlight section. So the harmony, the episode is going to be called Harmony and Highlights, obviously. Where we just talk about what are some of our personal highlights from reading the Gospels, from doing this short little series. And one of mine was John's Logos idea in in John 1. Because he does use the word Logos, which shows up in both Stoic philosophy and in Philo's more progressive Jewish philosophy, which is just before Christ. They lived at the same time. And although the biblical text doesn't rule out that, hey, those things contribute. It emphasizes more that this is the word of God by which he spoke and created the world. And it emphasizes more of a Jewish origin, but it doesn't deny those more modern conceptions. Like the Stoics more viewed it as like a it's kind of, actually I can read it here. In an ethical sense, Stoics thought that the logos, quote, gives all things their essential nature and gives life and reason to men. In fact, the logos is a man taking form in the human soul. And so the idea was when you embody what's like true ethical believing, or ethical, not behaving, behavior, you continue to embody this abstract logos, true word that I think actually borrows its more cosmological ideas from the Anu Malish, by which ordered chaos is tamed by the spoken word of Marduk. And so by living ethically, you live out a taming of reality.
Yeah.
And that's an inherited thing from way back, that you can see the emphasis, you can see it pop up in Stoicism. Philo's, which is a Jewish Alexandrian theologian / philosopher, he also plays with the idea of logos. But he kind of does it that it's the reason or mind or mental faculties.
It's almost a muse, but more embodied in yourself rather than exterior. Isn't that the idea?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you guys are gonna scoff at me when I talk about this, but even in the Tao of the Eastern religions, they talk about the way to speak, reason. It's more abstract, but the idea is essentially that when you live in the way, which is the way of the heavens, the unknown realities of the world that are behind everything, not the earthly ways, which are the things we understand and know. Yeah. When you operate in that, you bring a unity in humans individually and humans at mass, between the chaos and the order that rides within them. In the same way that Marduk is brought to tame chaos.
Yeah.
But in his sense, it's order reaching out and defeating chaos.
Yeah.
Like bringing it down. Whereas in this one, it's this dualistic sense where it's the way is what brings order and chaos together in a unity.
More of a harmony peace thing. Yeah. Which is indicative of Eastern thought.
Yeah.
Doesn't he kill Tiamat with a bow and arrow, though? Isn't that how that goes?
Yes, but
because
Tiamat's about to blow the fire as a dragon, and he speaks the magic words and fills her up so she can't do anything.
Yeah.
And then because that's why the gods go to Marduk. It's because he has the magic of the words. Yeah. Whereas they do not.
And well, you can see that there are parallels which John doesn't make specifically. But he doesn't rule them out. Jesus' life is the way that you are to emulate, to tame the chaos in life. To what's that?
Keep going.
I was gonna then go on to Philo, but
and if John is the same author as the Revelation story, Jesus coming down on the white horse is a newer depiction of the Marduk killing Tiamat.
Yes. It is, and I wasn't going to say that.
He's got the word of God written on his forehead, and he's got the eyes of fire, symbolizing the same thing as Marduk having the eyes around his head. Yeah. He comes in with his army, and they defeat the demons of Tiamat, or in this case, the demons of the Great Red Dragon, which is the same symbol as Tiamat, and he annihilates them using the sword coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Again, polemic theology.
Also literary devices. Don't read too much of your own theology into that story. It gets
wild.
Yeah, I don't know.
Another
guardrails on that one, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention that because, but I love it.
He clearly takes from it. That's it.
Yes, polemic.
That's all I can say.
Polemic. Another person to actually use it is Philo, who's kind of like logos. He rationalized was the wisdom or reason of God, originating in the mind of God. Yeah. The weird part is it's not entirely clear if it's a personification. Actually, that's not true. Some people say it's not entirely clear. based off of my studies, it's pretty clear that it's not a personification, that it's like just an idea.
Yeah.
He has gotten on to, he has like toyed with the idea of not incarnation per se, but he said something to the effect of
Is this the guy that almost got it right?
I'll find it here. You can edit this out. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'll fill in. Is the quote the one where he says, is sooner God become a man than man become a god?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And it's funny because he says that as he's having these logos ideas, as he's living in the same age as Christ, and it's interesting how close he
was so close.
Oh yeah.
So close.
He was older.
Do you think God, because he loves his like people and wants them to come to him, do you think he was just like, no? like I know he knows everything and blah blah blah, but like in the same way with Lazarus, where he's like, no, you're coming back to life. Where Jesus is just like, no, you were so close.
Yeah.
Like you were like 5 years off. Like.
Well, it shows how it wasn't black and white in the ancient world, right? Like, we see everything through the lens of, like, polarization now, right? Where everybody's part of a different group.
You're right or you're wrong.
It probably wasn't quite like that. I mean, of course, there were Jews and Gentiles, and they made that distinction themselves, but...
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different thought in the ancient world that was developing right alongside, like you said, Logos, and it's being grabbed from exterior and brought into the faith.
Humanity is dynamic.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's not entirely clear if it's grabbed from exterior and brought into the faith. Actually, I would argue it's not.
Okay. Yeah.
What it does is it leaves the doors open, and it's like you can see that in the biblical text, right? Yeah. However, what it appears to really double down on is particularly, well, obviously in John 1, is the whole going back to through the word God created the heavens and earth. It's going back to Genesis 1, which is clear not just in that instance in John, but there's his whole by him all things were made, nothing without him was ever made that was made, right? And I think verse 2. But there's also, it builds on the idea that that the word, or Hebrew davar, is God's act of revelation. It is thus saith the Lord, right? These are the words of God. These are the words of God that created the world. These are how God reveals himself. And John seems to play more on those themes than the other themes that are at play in the world at that time. Not that he closes the door on them, which is very interesting. Just a real quick, another thing about John's Logos, and in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. If you're dealing with JWs who deal with their whole, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was a God, there are so many tools that actually go through the Greek for people who don't know anything about Greek, about why that doesn't suffice to...
The argument of the definite article is what you're going to be looking for, right?
Yeah. A great video for someone who doesn't actually know anything about Greek is actually done by Jack Kinner, God or a God, John 1:1, a Greek grammar. Yeah. It's a great video. It's on YouTube. I've used it before. I'd recommend it if that's something like you're like, I don't know the background of that. But that's one of the highlights that I liked. I always like John 1. It's good.
Oh, okay.
It's good.
Yeah.
And the parallels between that and Genesis are awesome.
Yeah. But Josh, you got some highlights. I can see your paper.
Yeah. My first highlight, where did I have it? Is John 17, the high priestly prayer. It was mentioned in a one-off by myself, just quickly, because I just love how personal John is compared to the other Gospels. And this passage is phenomenal because it's not just Jesus talking to a crowd, it's not just Jesus talking to his disciples, it's Jesus praying to himself. Like to his Father. Yeah. But like
not in the modalism way though, are you there? You're a little modalist?
No. But it's so profound because it's just straight up Jesus' like in the moment thoughts and desires.
Oh, yeah.
Like for his disciples, for everyone who believes, for the world, you see a beautiful relationship between him and the father, where it mentions his relationship with his father. He talks about his relationship with his father, but here you actually see it lived out. How much he just like, and it's like right before he's about to die. And it's just it's such a vulnerable insight into the man God.
Yeah.
That
What was the verse you said?
chapter 17.
Oh, okay.
To one, yeah, chapter 17. It's awesome. It's one of the chapters or parts of the Bible where I come back like late at night sometimes, and I'll read, and they'll just bring me to tears. You know, like you have that verse where you're just like, shit.
You're like, yes, I do know that feeling.
You're like, oh man,
that cuts. You know, you pray, you have your relationship with Jesus, and it's good and stuff. You pray to him, and you're just like, oh God, I need help, or thank you God for how good you are. And then you read that, and you're like, oh my gosh, this means so much more than it.
Yeah, this is so much more than my meager relationship with Christ. As awesome as that is, as important as that is.
Yeah, because this is the model of that perfect, unbroken relationship with God that Adam had, but decided to leave behind.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no. And it's beautiful because he's talking about you in one passage. In verse 20 down, he's talking about you. And that's terrifying.
Weird, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, there's going to be some people that believe after. Keep them safe.
That's you and me.
It's you and me. And the listeners.
Yes.
Yeah.
Joel, you got some highlights?
just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
I might be lost in something.
I got a few more highlights.
Oh, you
Just go on
talked
your
so
next
much
one and
already.
I'll hop on. Just
Yeah?
give me a
Okay.
second.
No, this sounds good. This is why we have 3 people. I also have Luke and Matthew's genealogies. And it's just
really?
like,
Okay.
why? Right? Just a list of people's name. I like them because genealogies are super boring the first time you read them.
I like it because it's not fun.
No, it's one of those things like Leviticus where you're just like, this is so boring. It makes you stop reading the Bible. It's so boring.
It's true.
Right? Yeah. Like, everybody goes through there's that funny, like, thing that everybody goes through where they're like, I tried to read the Bible and then I hit Numbers, I hit Leviticus, I hit Deuteronomy, and I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, you just missed the battle scenes. Which is, again, just another genealogy, but it's of all the people Josh killed. But then you've got, like, the Genesis genealogies, and it's just like, yeah, who cares? I don't...
Oh, but they're super important.
But they're super important. And it's because genealogies are a specific literary device to tell you a note or a message or a theme through repetition. Hey, Abraham had a kid, and then he died. Abraham's kid had a kid, and then he died. That kid had a kid, and then he died. That guy had a kid, and then he died. Why? Oh, because just before God said you're going to die. Mm-hmm. Because you're sinful. Oh, okay, cool.
And then, I can't think of his name. Enoch. Enoch mm-hmm. walked with God.
And was no more.
Yeah. And then the next guy died. And then the next guy died. And then the next guy died.
And it's also the 7th one of 14.
Yeah, it's like the guy has...
Yeah. And what's the point? If you walk with God, you don't die.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Right? And so it's... These genealogies have such a profound thing. Profound messages mixed with them. And inconsistencies aside, it's just beautiful seeing Matthew's, like, rigid Jewish desire to show, hey, here's Abraham, here's David, here's the exile, here's the descendant line all the way back to Jesus, the Messiah. He was going to be a son of Abraham. He has to be a descendant of David to be on the throne. And after the exile shows that he's, I guess, a part of the priesthood.
No, not as far as I'm aware. I think what it's to do is
from Jeshua.
I think its primary function though was to show
Kingship.
that his through the exile where they lost a lot of the genealogy, that he's still part of David's household.
Flip to the Matthew one because there might be a.
You might totally be right. That'd be cool if you were. I'd like that.
Hezekiah, Manasseh, Josiah, Jeconiah, Shealtiel. Zerubbabel,
Kingship.
Eliakim, Adiad, Azor, Zadok.
Okay.
Is Zadok one of the priests?
Zadok, I believe, is a name that's multiple times. He is at one point the priesthood is limited to him by Solomon. Yeah, Solomon.
Eliakim. Yeah.
But that seems
Solomon
out of
would have been.
way before that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a reoccurrence of the same name.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the actual high priest, Zadok.
Because it was Jeshua was the high priest at the same time as Zerubbabel was the king.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Adiad. Yeah. So, but you get this like note is like he's tracing it all back for you. Which was super important to the Jewish people. And then you got with Luke, you got this like, and he was the son of in reverse.
Yeah.
Not the top down, but the bottom up. And it goes back to, and the Son of God. And he's just making this beautiful point that it's like, hey, this guy, Jesus, is the Son of God.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because he makes this other connection where he's just like, oh, Son of God, because, he's the incarnation and the birth of a virgin, or birth by a virgin.
Yeah.
And he's the Son of God because he is ultimately
A descendant
of all of
Adam,
humanity.
who is a descendant of God.
Yeah. And so he ties the dual nature and single personhood of Christ in his genealogy.
Yeah. And so you got these beautiful notes given in this, what modern people would say, boring way.
It would have been very important to the original audience, though, right? Like, it would have been right what they wanted to hear.
Yeah. Joel, did you get your thing?
Yeah, no, I got my thing.
Beautiful.
For some reason, I had the wrong verse reference written down, and I was like, okay, I have to read the verse, and it's gone.
I gotta read the entire Bible.
Got to make sure it's there. Yeah, so I just read the Bible during that little time I was taking a nap.
You put the audio Bible on at 10 times speed.
Absolutely. So mine was actually also relevance to the Jewish community of Matthew. Which, of course, it was, because that's like my whole thing. I really enjoy that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's the my God, why have you forsaken me? Which is, one of the Psalms that Christ quotes while he's on the cross, right? And it's also the Psalm that references casting lots for his clothing, right? So it ties everything kind of together there and shows that there's a liturgy behind what's happening.
Who wrote the Psalm?
It's attributed either to or for David. But even then, it might have been after. So Psalm 22 is the psalm I'm talking about. It's often called the suffering king or the suffering servant. And it starts off with, my God, why have you forsaken me? Which is what he's starting here. And the weird thing is, and it seems like it's a liturgy, right? So it's a verse that's meant to be read out to its fullest extent. So the fact that Jesus quotes this on the cross, I really don't think that God is like turning his face away, like the hymn says, right? Like the Father turns his face away. I don't think that's what he's going for. I think he's starting a liturgy of the suffering King, and showing that once the psalm comes to its completion, then he will be king, and that's the whole idea. Is that right now you're going through the suffering, but it's referencing an entire narrative of enthronement that shows him, fulfilling God's plan.
Well, yeah, because you get that verse 8. If it's the idea that by quoting it, he's alluding to the whole thing. Yeah, you get this. The verse 8. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him. For he delights in him. Yeah, which is a callback to his baptism.
And you also get back Hebrews. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but Hebrews is the whole thing of with great tears, Christ cried to be delivered, and he was.
Yeah,
is the next line.
Yeah,
and this whole thing is that just as Christ was delivered from death through death, so will those who believe in him.
And the psalm ends prophetically. They shall come and proclaim his righteousness to the people yet unborn. That what he has done.
That's whack.
Yeah. Well, and it's like a paradox between the two verses, right? Because there's actually three sections. It's lament, then pray, or lament, thanksgiving, and then praise. Yeah. Right, because it's this moving from basically the sin of the world. So he talks about like I'm a worm, I'm a useless piece of garbage kind of thing, which is a super.
And you get Paul's "He became sin."
Yeah, no, he took on the suffering of humanity, and what Psalm 22 references is, I would say, the suffering of humanity, and then gradually turns it back to God so that the unborn will know him. Which is
just a...
Wow.
Yeah, they shall come and proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, that he has done it. That he has done it.
It is finished.
It is finished.
Yeah, obviously. So going through the Gospels, that was definitely a highlight for me. It's like, oh, you're referencing old text. Oh, there's more to this. This is a hyperlinked text.
Well, it's not just a hyperlinked text. It's like God just screaming, like, I did it! I did it!
Yeah.
It's so cool.
David's back on the throne, ladies. That's really good.
Yeah. You were all asking when I do it.
Yeah.
I did it.
It's a mic drop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Man, I love the Bible. I love Jesus.
Josh is over here just having a good time.
Yeah.
It's, it's like God knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Do you want another one?
I do, actually. It's one that Josh and I got into. Where we not got into, but we
argued.
I was left out.
What's that?
I was left out.
Yeah.
I
Joel wasn't.
Well,
I don't care.
Let's bring him and the audience into this
No, I'm
topic.
having the conversation backwards.
I'm going to be the arbiter of this debate. Okay.
It's one of those things. We didn't get into it. I brought it up and I was cool. Like I was like, oh, this is cool. And then Josh just went, oh my goodness, this is so cool. And then just went away. It was like, wow, I didn't know that, but that's very interesting. But in Luke 8, 43 to 48, there's the Jesus walking through the crowd, right?
Yes.
And then there's the woman who's had continuous discharge, and she touches his garment, and then he's like, whoa, like someone touched me. What's going on? I
and
felt
his
that.
disciples are like, are you dumb? Like, you're surrounded by people.
What are you
touching you?
What do you want from me? What got me though is, unless without the incarnation, people who are trapped in their sin, which Leviticus 15:2 makes this idea that actually makes it law that discharge makes one unclean, and they cannot therefore approach the tabernacle or the temple. You cannot approach God. It's a great analogy for how sin functions.
Yes.
You can talk about how socially harsh that is on the individual, which is fair enough. I don't have time now to get into that. But as an analogy of what's going on and how that's like actually playing out in her life, it's a great analogy of Jesus' function as God reaching out. So she, because of her uncleanliness, cannot approach God, cannot enter the temple, and she cannot enter the temple and approach God for years. She's done everything that she can. She spent her fortune, all that she has, trying to get into this so she can be back into normal Jewish community and society and relationship. Yeah. And she can't. And it's over. But Jesus comes. He is God. Yeah. He goes into the crowd with the people, as what was mentioned with God moving with his people, with the tabernacle, dwelling amongst the people, God being with Adam and Eve in the garden, the whole idea of God being with his people.
3 concentric circles.
Yeah, so that he can come in, and that those who would otherwise be unclean can then approach. Yeah. And so then you start to have in the prophets, it's mentioned more explicitly in Ezekiel 44, that God's holiness, and it's mentioned a bit with the priests also in Leviticus as well, the priest's garments and all that, is what will create a contagious holiness. Yeah. That will, just as uncleanliness was contagious. If someone was unclean and they touched something else that's unclean, and it would continue to function until you did the proper sacrifices and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. When God steps on the scene, his holiness is just as contagious and can cleanse and purify and allow everyone to then approach.
Well, and one would say even more contagious, superior.
Yeah, well, that's the idea, because it undoes.
Yeah, because with sin, in the reverse, the whole idea of like the woman cannot approach the temple is the idea that she could, but it would be destructive to herself if
Yes.
the idea of that if you approach God in his holiness, it would destroy you. But God is not tainted by your sin.
No.
But
It's for you.
yeah, but God's holiness is infectious upon everything.
Yeah.
Nothing is unaffected by it.
Yeah.
In the end,
It's
where
it's,
sin is only effective to everything but God.
it's such a great, at least that story for me, is such a great little microcosm of linking Old Testament, like developing the need for salvation, then presenting how the incarnate Christ solves that
Yeah.
need that needed to be shown, right?
Yeah.
And then how that affects human relationship and hope.
Yeah, and to give the picture for people who may not understand the analogy we're presenting. The idea is that the crowd is a stand-in. The way the crowd is oriented is a stand-in for the tabernacle or the garden. Being that, like, you in the middle you have the holy place, the most holy place, where God resides. Jesus in this story. He's surrounded by his disciples, the priesthood, whatever, the more religious people in the whole the surrounding temple area, the holy place. And then you've got the crowds, the people, the courtyards area. And this woman can't enter any of that.
Yeah.
But
If Jesus becomes carnate and moves through the crowds, moves with his people, then she can't approach.
and she pushes through.
Yeah.
And then not only that, calls her daughter the same word that Jairus uses, and it's the only time Jesus uses that word.
And it's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a highlight for me.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. It's a beautiful story.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a bunch of our stuff is highlighted the vulnerability and the love of Jesus. Just
It's
the little
so
moments
good.
Yeah.
where it's just like, he was such a sweet man.
You know, Jesus was a good guy.
You should try to be more like Jesus.
Yeah.
Moral influencer.
It's weird that nobody ever makes the argument that Jesus was a bad person. It's either he wasn't God or he was God.
Like a good teacher or the Messiah.
Yeah, it's like he was just a good teacher or he was actually God. But
Yeah.
nobody's like, he's actually a bad person.
I've
Christopher Hitchens
come
might.
across that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's always been the abuse of his teaching in the church.
Yes.
It's always the larger church
And
organization.
Christopher Hitchens tends to go more towards the Father rather than Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus, he might go,
They
he's okay.
hate the Old Testament God
Yeah.
type deal. Yeah.
He's just the same guy.
I've heard it. It's normally done by people who, let's say, in Christopher Hitchens' brother's fashion and book, Peter Hitchens, The Rage Against God, is it's
Fair
done
enough.
with people who have a personal vendetta against the personhood of Jesus.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not normally done by people who either come from a different religion
Mm-hmm.
or like Gandhi with the whole "I would be a Christian if it weren't for Christians."
Yeah.
It's not normally said by people who approach it from a level head or a different perspective,
Yeah.
or comparative religious studies. It's people who have a personal problem with Jesus, which is like also how I relate to other actual human beings.
Cool.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Joel, do you have another highlight?
What was my? This is a personal favorite of mine, and I like that it's the only miracle across all of the books is the feeding of the 5,000.
Yeah.
I really like the providence of Christ shown in the thing.
Is that because of you grew up on the coast?
I don't
some
I don't
fish?
think that's it. I mean, maybe that
Okay.
could be part of it. I like his denial of kingship. I really like that
Yep.
could be seen as a throwback to Judges.
Yeah.
With what's his name, Gideon, denying kingship.
Oh, there's also he refuses to become king until it's time.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, for sure. Like it won't.
Caleb, I don't mean to say this, but that's literally what he just said.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm just slow.
Yeah.
No, Caleb, I love you. I just want you to know the situation you're in.
That's cool. That's cool.
Situation
You ever
is-
wanted to be condescending? Cool. That's the situation you're in.
We've created a very good environment here.
Joel, please continue.
Yeah, I like the feeding of the 5,000. The whole situation. The part where like, he's just mourning over John the Baptist's death, and then he goes and he actually takes care of the needs of the people, and he continues to preach. And he's like, "Hey, you should feed these people." And they're like, "We don't have enough money for that." He goes, "Yeah, probably somewhere, right?" And then he just makes a bunch of food. It's awesome. That's the part I liked when I was a kid. I was like, "Oh man, so much food."
I like the idea that the disciples are like, but we don't have enough money to feed this city. And Jesus is like, did I stutter?
It's also one of the interesting things. This is like unlocking a very far memory in Gospels class. And it was one of the Gospels mentions who he asks. The other one doesn't. The one that doesn't, and I wish I could remember these off the top of my head, but this is too far back in my brain. The one that doesn't mention who he asks in a different place mentions the guy who he does ask in one of the other Gospels as a local of that area of Capernaum.
Yeah.
Meaning he asks in the Gospel that doesn't specify that guy was from that region, but only specifies that he asked that guy. He's asking, hey, local dude, where, like, hey, is there a place to buy food? And he's like, no, they're so far away. We should send them out now. What have you got? But it's just one of those, actually, Harmony of the Gospels, like dovetail things where it's like, oh, yeah, that just makes sense.
Here's another thing. I wonder if it was any good.
Are you saying that God's provision of food isn't enough for you?
No, but like, here's the thing. Was it the best fish ever? Probably not.
I think, dude, God's got a trend. Well, he dropped cinnamon buns from heaven for his people for 6 days.
That's true. Maybe bug pieces. We don't know, but
Well, dude, what's the connection between that and manna? Do you think there's a connection?
Well, I mean,
like
Jesus
one
does
to
go
one.
on to say the comparison between him bringing him as the bread of life, bringing down food, and saying they want the bread from heaven.
Yeah.
And he's
Like, is that it? Is that, like, it's just like just a harken back to, hey, God takes care of you.
Well, yeah, because you've got this idea of like you've got a bread and a meat.
Yeah.
Being
The quail and
the
the quail and the
manna. And then in this one, you've got bread and fish. And then they're like, hey, you should be king because you do the things that God does.
like, fair enough. Also, if your king could just make food for everybody.
Yeah. Well, no, because that's what they wanted. They wanted a king that would just take care of them. And he's saying, no, I want to be a king that transforms you. And that has to happen later.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Get in the boat. Get in the boat. Get out.
No,
Get in the boat, we're walking across.
You're getting in the boat. I'm walking around.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'll walk.
He's like, I need to take a minute.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wonder how irritated Christ was during that. No, seriously. Well, he's just mourning.
Well, I mean,
and then everyone's like, "Hey, can we have something to eat?"
I mean, this is also the time where he passive aggressively tells the disciples, "Are you going to leave too?"
I don't know if it's passive aggressive. I don't think so. I think it's more like
You can read so many emotions into the story.
To me, it sounds more like how are you guys
What are you going to
doing?
do about this?
Yeah.
It's like when you're done hanging out with everybody, you're like, "How you guys getting home?"
Hey guys, can I get a ride?
You guys can just get in the boat. I'm just go walk. I like this. This is a good way to look at this story.
No, Jesus was not passive aggressive. I take that. No, in that passage.
Okay. Because Jesus has some interesting behavior.
Well, I mean, no, here's the other one, right? Is the other time it uses, so the same word used for, I believe, this, I could be completely wrong here, but I believe this is true. The same word used for Jesus when he's at Lazarus's grave, weeping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That same word is the word used for anger that Jesus experiences at the temple.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's this idea of, like, emotional angst with the hatred of the thing. Like the loss, but also the hatred for the reason why.
Interesting.
But it's like, and he makes a whip and then goes and, how long does it take to make a leather whip?
Yeah, like
So he's just sitting there looking at how many guys priests, and he's just like, making it. Where'd he get the leather from?
sandals. That's actually probably the answer.
Yeah, he just took them off the disciples. He's like, give me your sandals. Give me. They're like, okay, this guy's probably going to do an analogous, like, miracle, blah, blah.
He's just angry, but that's fine.
Them, just staring, stewing at them, like, getting angrier. And then he just starts whipping people. And I mean, animals, not people. And, yeah, whatever. And then disciples are just like, oh, this is a...
This is a teaching
Is there
moment.
some kind of analogy there of preparing rebuke and not just going in guns a-blazing? Because I've always seen that. Right? Like, if it took him 3 hours, it wasn't like he just jumped in and he's like, oh, man, this is what's happening, now I'm angry, and then he just finishes everybody.
I don't think that's explicit in the text. You'd have to say,
Man,
like,
I
that's...
like putting emotions on Jesus. I'm sorry about that. But that's
But
whenever I
love
read
the,
it, that's
like,
my
him just like
outlook.
staring at the money traders while he's like, just like, and they're like, what is that guy doing? Just like looking at each other. They're like talking, and they just see Jesus.
He's getting up.
He's got the Stanley Kubrick stare where he's just.
Staring at people in church is so much fun. It's my favorite thing. I used to lock eyes with the drummer and just wait.
There's this guy at my church that every time I look over, there's just like, he's like through the crowd of people. He's one of the dads of the youth or whatever, and he's just like, got like the Kubrick stare staring at me. Like everybody's singing and he's looking in my direction. I don't know if it's at me or the person beside me, but it's just like the most like, it's intentional anger and dislike.
What is he like after church?
Fine. He's a good guy. Just whatever. I could be mid-song singing, loving, turn to look at the crowd, just like to see what's happening, and then it's just this guy just like dun dun through the crowd.
Yeah,
That's funny. We're so off topic.
I feel like we're still on topic.
Read it in the Bible?
Sure.
Yeah, this is our new segment that we started 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. Called Reddit in the Bible. We go to internet theologians somewhere, or people asking questions about theology, or something like that.
It doesn't have to be from Reddit.
Could be on Reddit. It has been so far, but we're open to anything. So send in your questions or whatever. Yeah. What have you read it in the Bible? Wait. Oh no, Josh is doing this. I was looking at Caleb.
Yeah. Before I say it though, yes, please comment on our website with the little comment thingy and ask questions because we like talking with you.
You can
guys.
also message us with a chat. Colton gets all those, so just like make sure to light that up.
Yes. Comment on the YouTube so that we can say stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that we know we have listeners.
Yeah, more than just a bot
Our
that I have
moms.
to hire.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks. I don't think my mom knows. I haven't told her yet. Anyways, read it in the Bible. So, read it in the Bible. We wanted to talk about this theological questions in Reddit, and the one this day is the concept of an all-powerful God condescending to humanity, lowering himself to becoming a human, lowly slave, servant, and being killed by them unique to Christianity.
That definition as presented there, as narrow as it is, yes.
Okay,
That's my thing.
I mean, I think yes to some degree. I think we're gonna have to break it down a little bit more than that, though.
Okay.
Could you try and restate the question? Actually?
Yes. Should we do like the ladder up where we build on the idea? Quickly?
Maybe, but can I call a friend?
Let's call Colton. See what he's doing.
For the question.
Yeah,
I want to make
sure.
sure I get it right so I get the $1
Sure.
million.
Do you? Okay. How about this? Do gods die in other religions?
Absolutely.
So that's not unique.
No.
Do we have some? Okay. Yeah. Do gods die to other humans because humans killed them?
I mean, yeah, in Greek stuff that happens.
Like,
I think it does. Or maybe
there's a
I'm
lot
just
of
thinking
movies that do
demigods.
that.
Yeah.
But like, is there like a god that kills like Hera? Sorry, a person that kills Hera, or like
there's humans that ascend to godhood by killing other gods.
Do we have an example?
Does Hercules do that?
Yes, but he was born of a god, so he's a demigod.
Yeah, but there's instances of that.
Yeah.
Oh, what's the name of the god?
Remember? Oh, is it? No. Well,
How does Mithras die? Or is that one of those ones where it's just like, who knows? But it will always argue it.
Yeah. Okay, so there are gods that die. There are potentially gods that are killed by humans. I think maybe in some of the Hindu. I believe some of
but that's
the
because
avatars
of their
might.
blurring of nature and supernatural stuff.
Yes.
It's kind of all one thing.
Yeah.
So to say that they're gods doesn't make a ton of sense.
In what way? Because like there are gods that have avatars.
Yeah. One that starts with a G. Which one's that? The elephant head.
Oh yeah.
Dies to his stepfather.
Yes, turns into the goddess of death. I become
No,
death, the
I don't-
destroyer of worlds.
No, it's a dude.
Interesting.
I've
The
lost it.
elephant?
Yeah, the elephant one with the arms.
Genna.
Is it Genna? I'm just gonna Google. We might have to cut this out.
No. We can keep talking. So there are gods that die. Balder gets killed by the other gods. Horus and Osiris die multiple times in different myths. Quetzalcoatl has the dying and rising cycle.
Dionysus is torn apart as a baby and is resurrected by a human woman.
Interesting. Okay. Zagreus is a Nomai Nu Mikado. I probably pronounced that wrong. There's also a Japanese fire god. There's Baal, the Canaanite god.
See, but he's not killed by humans.
Yeah, but he dies.
Yeah. If you expand the definition to gods that die, and resurrect.
Odin is killed by Fenrir.
Sure.
Loki's son wolf.
Are we just going gods that die or gods that die and resurrect?
I think we're talking about just gods that die.
Oh, then
right
like
now.
hundreds all over the place.
Okay. Then we have gods that were killed by humans. Potentially Dionysus.
Yep.
We've got gods that are killed by demigods. Hercules kills another.
Yeah.
Do we have a god that makes himself a human that dies?
Not that I have come across personally.
I can't think of any.
Granted, to be fair, most of our studies are centered around, and so if someone knows of one, let us know in the comments. But most of our studies are centered around ancient Near East and Greco-Roman.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not as familiar with Greco-Roman as I should be.
There is, I am pretty sure, because there is a common religious note in the Hindu religions where the gods become avatars or in human form. They've got blue skin or whatever, but like Krishna, he's born as a child and stuff like that, but they know he's a god, the avatar of a god, and I believe some of the avatars are like they die.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
There's different incarnations of them.
Yeah. Is there an all-powerful god that dies?
It's not fair because you can't say monotheism and then expect it to actually compare to anything else that's in a pantheistic environment.
Well, there's other monotheisms.
Sure, yes, but name them.
Well, does Allah die? No.
No.
I guess they're not all powerful, but do Ahura Mazda or the
That's not monotheism, though.
No, you're right.
It's dualism, but it's close to monotheism.
Because it's not all powerful.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What do we got? We got that Egyptian monotheistic religion, but so
Oh,
little
that
is
was
known.
Literally one generation.
Yeah, so
It was
little
like
is
7 years.
Yeah.
You guys, hey guys, you want to just worship one god? It's like no.
Yeah.
We don't.
Ammon.
Sure. So little is known about the theology of that deity.
Yeah. What about? Oh, there's a monotheism in the steppe nations. I forget the god. It's Tendri.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes. Check him if he dies.
We should do a tier list.
That would be awesome.
That would be an awesome stream. Is just to talk about
Tengri.
read Wikipedia.
Tengri.
No, there's a heavenly father and an earthly mother. It's a form of ancestor worship.
Okay, but is the mother superior or inferior or equal?
The mother's usually superior.
Which is interesting considering that in all those cultures the masculine is.
It looks to be more of an equal thing.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay. I gotta read more about that religion.
I need to read more about Greco-Roman stuff. Here's the thing. I'm not going to claim to be someone who knows all of this stuff because there's you can get PhDs in specific studies of specific religious groups.
Yeah.
I can tell you in my studies,
I
have not come across one that is relatively close.
Okay.
The biggest influence, actually the best case, which sounds horrible, the best case is Baal.
Yes, but he's not all powerful.
I know, but and he's also, his death and resurrection is intrinsically tied to the changing of the seasons.
Well, yeah, and even
but if you want to make a connection between Christ's death and resurrection, the best one to make is Baal. You can make Osiris, Horus ones, they're super weak.
Yeah, it's pieces.
Yeah.
Together.
I still think Osiris is actually one of the strongest, but that's
Really?
my take. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's got a death and rebirth, and then a
But
unification of the Son and the Father.
He also brings about the pathway to the afterworld.
He becomes king of the dead. There's not a true resurrection. He becomes king of the underworld. He's not actually.
I mean, yeah, I guess so.
The resurrection isn't.
Well, I think in the other,
we're getting into like some paganism. We're
getting into Egypt.
No.
Yeah,
I think
so.
but the Egyptian myths of Osiris are also contradictory.
They're contradictory, and they switch out who is Osiris and who is Horus sometimes.
Because there is the one where Osiris's body parts are brought out by Horus back to the world of the living, and they reign together.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
It's there. You're right.
Yeah.
That exists.
And so, like, I'm not saying that that's the predominant one. I'm just saying that there's, because of the nature of the Egyptian myths being so contradictory, there's so many accounts of the same story that are different.
Yeah.
But even then, that goes to your argument saying, like, it's not a picture of an actual god because they can't agree on what their god did.
Yeah. Also,
Like-
not all powerful.
Yeah. Well, and then even condescends himself into humanity, whereas the Hindu gods that become avatars, they don't become truly human.
Yeah.
If you're going to make a comparison between Hercules or the other demigods, they're born of a like they have half the nature of a god and half the nature of a man, where Jesus is described as having fully both.
Yeah, and that's why John takes such great lengths, because he's communicating that fully humanity, fully godship in a environment which it would be half and half.
Yeah.
And they would have you'd have a bunch of benefits because you're Zeus's son, so you obviously have super strength and all this kind of stuff, but it's not really emphasized. It's just like, no, Jesus is dude, but he's also the incarnation of Yahweh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the fullness of,
Yeah, no, I was just going to say if we're going to put a cap on it,
well, there's
then we would have to say, oh, sorry, is there another stage?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
I think
cool.
it's, does that god? So we've said that there are gods that have died. There are gods that have been killed by humans, but there's no all-powerful gods that have died. There's no gods that have become humans, condescending themselves fully, that have died, and there's none of those gods that have been resurrected and changed humanity for all course of history.
That we know of.
I don't know if we should say that we know.
No, hey, I don't know all gods.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like there are gods that claim to bring in the after, to bring in the end of the world, like Ragnarok. The death of Odin brings in the end of the world. The Osiris's death brings the pathway to the afterlife.
Yeah.
But like there are pieces of the story, kind of like what we talked before about how when you talk about true and meaningful, beautiful things, you're going to touch on the divine. But Jesus hits all of it. An all-powerful God descends himself into becoming a human, dies for their sake by humans, is killed by them for their sake,
Yeah.
even though they're enemies. Like,
Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they do.
yeah. Or, as that dumb quote that I made, God created the means by which he could be killed.
It's not a dumb quote. That's a good quote.
No, but I just hate saying my own things.
That's why you say, there was a guy who once said,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's unique.
yeah. Yeah. If someone does think of a god in mythology that does challenge that, put it in the comments. I would love to engage on this. It's awesome. Like, it's a weird little hobby of mine that I'm not good at, but I love.
You mean as a religious scholar, you read religious texts?
No, I read texts written by people who love Gnosticism and do the whole, like, Jesus is just a, version of Egyptian mythology mixed with Greek stuff going on in Judaism, trying to, become relevant again. It's like, okay, sure.
Except effectively.
Well, and here's the thing is, most of all those scholars forget the Jewish grounding. Almost all of them.
Yeah.
But
The best work of Egyptian mythology is Moon Knight.
And Lion King.
I guess. Yeah. No, you're right. Huh. We don't have time for that, for sure.
Just a quick note, the Osiris Horus myth is the Shakespearean story of No.
No.
Yeah, Hamlet,
Yeah.
which is Lion King.
Yeah.
Everything's connected for always and ever.
Nothing is new under the sun.
Yes.
But it's I don't know if we really answer that question, because there's so many gods and so many myths. The thing is when you define the question that specific,
Yeah.
it's yes. If someone walks into a room and goes, "Oh, is there other dying and rising gods?" Yes, and they go, "Oh, therefore Jesus' story isn't really unique." Well,
No.
yeah, you got to actually, what is the claim in the Jesus story that's being made?
Yeah.
Is it just, hey, there's dude that claims to be God that dies and rises? Or is it dude that claims to be the one all-powerful deity? Yeah.
Well, no, but what's cool about what you said
In
is like
actual
there's
history.
so many other gods, like what you said, and then but like this just sounds like such a power move for like God saying like there are none other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one of
Like-
the other things that you'll notice within Jewish theology, in comparison, Jewish theology and any other stories that take place in Judaism,
Yeah.
pre-70 AD, versus other religious stories and mythologies, is a lot of the alternative, the non-Jewish stories and mythologies are designed to always be relevant in any, like, it's a reoccurring pattern, or it's a story that applies on many social levels, or it's kind of like an abstract story that you can apply all these different moments in life to, moments in history to, whereas in Jewish stories, at this time, at this place, God acted in real history for sure.
Yeah.
In a way that we can bet on him doing something later on in our time, but it's not going to be the exact same, because God acts, and he acts as the world changes.
Yeah.
It's not a formulaic repetition every time, but Jewish stories are, at this time, in this generation, at this place, God moved. And so obviously that's the way Christ shows up.
But it's I love the long history of the Bible is Messiah figures appearing and failing to do what they're supposed to, and obviously led by God showing an image. But then finally Jesus is there and he's like, "Fine, I'll do it myself."
It's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never send a man to do a
God's
God's
job.
Well, I mean, like one of my favorite Old Testament passage, Isaiah 59, the whole chapter is.
I think we should end it with this passage.
Oh, sure, okay.
Yeah.
Just because it's the gospel.
Well, no, I think like quoting the Bible, ending this great conversation that we've taken very far, would be a beautiful way to end the podcast.
So it starts off with the Lord's hand is not shortened that he cannot save, nor is the ear too dull that he cannot hear, but your iniquities have separated you from between you and God. And then it gets on to like, hey, it's our sin that causes us to be in this state. And then it gets into, oh, we can't get out. Therefore justice is far from us, and righteousness does not overtake us. We hope for light, but behold darkness, and for brightness, but we walk in gloom. We walk like the blind. We moan like we. There's nothing that can be done, and so then it goes. Well, justice is turned back, and righteousness is far away, because we're done. We can't do it. Those Messiah figures that pop up and fail aren't making it.
No.
And then in 59, 15 and 16, the Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no justice. He saw that there was no man, and wondered that there was no one to intercede. Then his own arm brought him salvation, and righteousness upheld him. And then it goes on to, he wraps himself in a cloak of zeal. His righteousness is his breastplate, and it just goes on to his characteristics, which will arm him for becoming
he's suiting up.
Savior. And then it's, a Redeemer will come to Zion, to those in Jacob who turn from their transgressions, says the Lord.
Yeah. He's suiting up.
Yeah.
I'll do it myself.
It's so good. It's so good.
good.
Which is kind of bringing in a theme from the Avengers when he grabs the gauntlet, armors up, and says, "I'll do it myself."
I don't know about the Jesus Thanos imagery we're going to end on, but okay.
Yeah. Joel, take us away.
Thanks for listening. We love you guys. Post a comment.
What's the next episode?
We don't know.
Hang on.
Hermeneutics.
Hermeneutics. Introduction to hermeneutics. How do you read the Bible?
Yeah.
Tell me how.
Now that we've talked about the message of the Bible, let's go back and read it.
Yeah. Very lightly, we're going to talk about hermeneutics, basic principles of hermeneutics. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Sound good. Joel, take us away again.
we are being taken away.